everyone. Welcome to Switchblade Sisters Social Club, the true crime podcast where two friends exploit their worst fears for your entertainment.
You're welcome.
I'm Dee, a writer and podcaster.
And I'm Isla from Criminally Good Books, a true crime and crime fiction bookshop in York.
Follow us on all the socials.
Except for X, obviously.
Or have a look at our website, switchbladesisterssocialclub.com.
Check them out for all our latest episodes, events, deals, and other weird stuff.
Listeners' discretion advised. So, something happened. We accidentally dressed the same.
Accidentally on purpose, Dee.
And it's also a bit of a throwback, isn't it, to when me and my sister used to record in our pajamas. Although neither of us are wearing our pajamas, we're just wearing flannel. That might as well be pajamas.
I love flannel. Yeah. I love, like, for people that can't see it, we're wearing red and black flannel shirts.
Yeah. I've got a 9 Inch Nails t-shirt underneath. What about you?
Just a bra, and I'm not
just
sure
a bra. Just a bra. Cool. Today is part 2 of the Port Arthur Massacre episode. But before we get started on that, we've had a big week as Palestinians / honorary Palestinians, in that the State of Palestine has finally been recognized by the UK. Now, for those of you who wonder what that means and whether it will make a difference, we're not sure yet, but it's a statement. We want it to be more than just a symbolic thing, but basically Britain has been since the 90s supporting a 2-state solution, which has been decided by the international community and supposedly by Israel and Palestine as well, that we will have an Israel and a Palestine living side by side in, hopefully, peace and justice. But the UK, even though they've prescribed to this solution, have not recognized the State of Palestine. So they don't recognize us as a state, whereas they have recognized Israel since 1950. They used a bunch of excuses. We don't know what the borders are, et cetera, which is bullshit because you don't need to have permanent, fixed, decided borders to be recognized as a state. It means that we are just an observer state in the UN, meaning we don't have voting rights, et cetera, et cetera. It means that we don't have parity of esteem when we go to negotiation tables, when we meet, just little things like...
Little things, big things.
Big things. I'm talking about within the UK. Basically, we didn't have an embassy here in the UK. We had a Palestinian mission. Yesterday, the embassy had a flag raising ceremony, and it's now an embassy with an actual ambassador. So it means when you have negotiations, when you have events here in the UK, you would have the Israeli ambassador meeting with the Palestinian head of the delegation, head of mission, which, for a while was my pops. Now it's someone else. It sets a tone. We were really disappointed that it's taken 75 years for us to get recognition as a state. And we're also really disappointed that originally they were talking about recognition if Israel continues with the genocide, like recognizing our inalienable rights, according to international law, was going to be a punishment to Israel, which again sets a precedent. It's not even a condition on us as Palestinians. It's a condition on someone else.
On someone else that dictates your life.
Exactly. And in the framework of our rights being a punishment to them, how is that going to work towards going, us being recognized as a state is a step forward for the peace process for everyone. It should be seen as a positive. It's not been seen as a positive, and this is why we're, as Palestinians, we never want to get too excited because every bit of good news is followed by a fucking ass whooping, and that is unfortunately what's happened since the declaration by the UK. There's been retaliation on the ground. There's already been 40 people that's been killed by the State of Israel. So we're reluctant to celebrate too soon, but I think it's really good, and I want it to be really good. I want it to be followed up with concrete actions. And these are not me being unreasonable or demanding, because this is what happens with other countries that commit war crimes. I want them to stop trading arms with Israel. And that trade goes both ways, and it includes intelligence and training and so forth. I want them to stop trading with the illegal settlements. Imagine this bizarre situation where the UK has for decades now said that the settlements in Israel are illegal. This is the towns, cities, some of these cities bigger than Tel Aviv, that are being built on stolen Palestinian land. They say they're illegal, and yet then they continue to trade with them. And for a little while, Michael Gove was even trying to say that if you actively boycott those illegal settlements as an organization, as a council, etc., then you're illegal. Which is bonkers, isn't it?
Oh, I didn't know that. I clearly missed that one.
We managed to stop this Michael Gove bill going through because it was ridiculous. So we would like that. We would like to stop the trade with the illegal settlements. Stop arms trade with a country that is now officially committing genocide.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
More pressure being put on Israel to resolve the situation.
A lot of people, Dee, my family have been asking, lots of people have been asking, they want to do something, but they don't know what to do. And I said this to you before, if you can just talk to someone about the reality of the situation, get them to not read one newspaper, look at a range of views, get them to, if you can do all your shopping at Co-op, who now have boycotted all Israeli products, look at what you're buying. Like, what else would you suggest to people that are, asking?
It sounds really lame, but write to your MP. We have on the Britain Palestine Project website, we do regular campaigns. This is a charity that I work with very closely. We do regular campaigns to email your MP, keep putting pressure on them. What are you doing about the situation? What's going on? How are you going to pressurize Israel? We have lots of draft emails, so you don't even have to,
they're really good.
So emailing your MP, putting pressure on them. Like you said, shopping at the Co-op, another way where you can avoid buying, at the very least, Israeli illegal settlement goods. Yeah, just following a few people that are actually living in Gaza and the West Bank on socials so that you can see what it's actually like. If you have Palestinian friends, sending them a little message saying, love you. I've had that so much from lots of my friends that have never really sort of, I haven't touched too much on politics with them. My non-political friends, let's say, so many more of them getting interested in what's happening, asking me questions, showing me support on that side of things. And it really does help because it's not easy being Palestinian at the moment. And it's nice having the support of others and people that don't have to caring and showing and making an effort. We as Palestinians or people involved in the Palestinian issue do not expect anyone to know anything about the issue. It's so long and complicated. So do not feel embarrassed if you're like, I don't get the full situation. It's actually not that complicated. At the moment, there's a genocide. How do we stop the fucking genocide? Right? That's the long and the short of it. So as long as you're on board with that, that's what we need to feel, right? I have to say that I went to see Kneecap last week. Kneecap
I was just about to say, tell us about it.
So the Gaelic rap band, genuinely great band, because, sometimes people are famous because of the controversy around them without actually having any genuine talent. This isn't one of those cases. They're so freaking good. But they've been super pro-Palestinian. They've suffered a huge amount as a result. I mean, one of them was even put in jail and accused of terrorism or whatever. I think that's all been dropped now. But I have to say, this is another thing that's new for us as Palestinians. I went with one Palestinian friend, Sharif, and some other non-Palestinian friends. We were at Wembley Arena, so really mainstream, huge place. And everyone was chanting free, free Palestine. That's new for us. We are used to going to like small solidarity events here and there and people, you know what I mean? Or like a demonstration in the streets of London or whatever. But to go to just a concert.
One of the biggest venues, venue. Yeah.
And having so much support. And then after, it happened several times that they were chanting and there was flags everywhere. And Kneecap obviously had a Palestinian flag on the stage at one point. The guy behind me was wearing like Celtic Palestine t-shirt, football t-shirt, Celtic even. And he was chanting free, free Palestine. And at one point, because I was like getting really emotional, it was embarrassing. I was like crying at times. I turned around and I was like, it's just that, we're not used to having just so many non-Palestinians in such a mainstream venue and event being so openly supportive of us. That's the kind of place that we would go and feel a bit nervous about telling people we're Palestinian in case people react badly to us. And he was like, oh, you're Palestinian? You're the first Palestinian I've met. And I was like, fucking hell, this guy's being so supportive. He's never even met one of us. He doesn't even know
Oh,
firsthand how fucking adorable we are.
but that's a Scottish thing as well, though. It's like how much like Scottish people are so
Hate the English.
pro-Palestine. Hey, I'm
It's
married to an English guy, so I
Yeah,
can
no,
say
it's not that. I think that there are the other nations in the United Kingdom are a little bit more understanding of being,
oppressed and occupied.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
you
it's just a
get it.
historical thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you get it a lot more than other countries such as England, let's say. So you have
yeah.
like a lot more sympathy and understanding of the nuances and so yeah, Scotland, Ireland, always been super supportive.
Ireland is insanely supportive. Absolutely.
So it's just been just a big week for me and Palestine.
I was walking to work, walking around, the city, and lots more people were wearing their kafirs. There was loads of flags hanging at windows and stuff. Spoke to one of the girls at work. She did a massive celebration of the weekend. So, like, yeah, it's like really good.
I
Really
know
good.
it's just, I hope it's good news. I just, it is good news. It's great news. Sorry, I don't want to be too pessimistic. It's great news that the UK and a bunch of other countries, France today and so
Yeah.
forth, have recognized the state of Palestine. I just hope that it means now that it's followed up with some changes on the ground for people. I do want to say that I've released an episode with the Britain Palestine Project. We had a spin-off podcast series called Palestine Matters. And the episode that we released yesterday with Humza Yousaf, who is, as you said, Scotland, super supportive. He's a former First Minister of Scotland and he's still MP in Glasgow. And he was the first Muslim First Minister, but also his wife's Palestinian and their family are stuck in Gaza. So some of you might remember that he was very vocal about that. And he's always been super vocal about Palestine. He's great on Instagram. So I did an episode with him on the importance of recognition. And we'd recorded it before the announcement came out, but it's, all about why is it important? And it is important because Israel wouldn't be so angry about it if it wasn't going to make a difference, right?
That's true. Never thought of that.
Exactly. It's important. And where do we go from here? Because recognition is just the beginning.
Exactly.
All right. Well, on that note, do you want to talk about
mass shootings?
Yeah. It was such a difficult episode. Like some topics are just so much harder than others. And I think it's because, this is obviously a horrendous incident, but there's been so many incidents since this one, mainly in the States.
I can't believe your stats, Dee. Sorry to interrupt, but your stats around, when you said how many, you said to me, guess how
at
many?
Least, it's nearly 2 mass shootings on average a day.
It's unreal.
In the States. And mass shooting meaning 4 or more people.
I mean, I said this to someone, I asked them to guess, and I think they said something like 3 a year. And so I told her, she said, but why don't we hear about it? And I was like, because it's every day. Like you don't hear about, you'll hear about the first few, and then there might be a stat on the rise of them, but you're not going to hear about every single one. And we're in a different country.
Yeah. And I know that even in the States, from having traveled there a lot, you don't hear about every single one there either, because you have like your state news and your national news and whatever. I mean, it's nearly 2 a day. Your whole newspaper would just be about these mass shootings if they've covered every single one. And especially, like you say, us in another country, we only hear about the ones that are the hate crimey ones, against a specific sexuality, ethnicity, religion, or whatever. And the ones that happen in schools, you know what I mean? The ones, I won't say the really bad ones because they're all fucking awful, but the ones that we hear about
more
meet certain criteria, let's say, for us to hear about them. So it's just awful. But I'm going to summarize what we talked about last week. So last week I went through what actually happened at Port Arthur. I'm going to summarize that a little bit. And then today I want to talk about the aftermath, which is largely around gun reform in Australia. I want to talk about some similar incidents in other countries, mainly here in the UK. And I want to talk about how the UK and Australia changed their gun laws and why the States has not and will not, unfortunately. So In summary, last time I took you through the devastating events of the Port Arthur Massacre. It was the 28th of April, 1996, in Tasmania. In the space of a single afternoon, Martin Bryant murdered 35 people and wounded dozens more, beginning with the couple that he held a grudge against, David and Sally Martin, at the Seascape B&B. Remember, his dad lost out on that sale to them and later took his own life, and Martin Bryant seemed to blame this couple that bought the B&B for his dad's demise. He then went to the Broad Arrow Cafe in Port Arthur and unleashed terror there in the car park and along the roads leading out of the site. Families were torn apart, tourists and locals were gunned down, and the small community of Port Arthur was changed forever. There was an overnight siege back at the Seascape guest house, and he was finally captured. But the horror of that day has left scars across Australia. In this episode, we're going to look at what came next, some of the grief of the survivors, the trial of Martin Bryant, and how this tragedy sparked one of the most sweeping changes to gun laws anywhere in the world, which is the one positive. And it's a pretty big positive, I think.
Yeah. It saved other lives, undoubtedly.
So many, I think, because I go into some stats about the decrease in gun crime and stuff like that. I want to just quickly read the names of the victims. It's not quick because unfortunately it's a really long list, but I'm going to do it. These are just the people that died because we know there's a lot more victims of the Port Arthur Massacre. So Winifred Joyce Aplin, 58. Walter John Bennett, 66. Nicole Louise Burgess, 17. Sue Leng Chung, 32. Elva Rhonda Gaylord, 48. Zoe Ann Hall, 28. Elizabeth Jane Howard, 26. Mary Elizabeth Howard, 57. Mervyn John Howard, 55. Ronald Noel Jerry, 71. Tony Vadivelou Kistan, 51. Leslie Dennis Lever, 53. Sarah Kate Lawton, 15. David Martin, 72. Nolene Sally Joyce Martin, 69. Pauline Virginia Masters, 49. Alana Louise Mikach, 6. Madeline Grace Mikach, 3. Nanette Patricia Mikach, 36. Andrew Bruce Mills, 39. Peter Brenton Nash, 32. Gwenda Joanne Neander, 67. William Zheng Ning, 48. I've said that so wrong. I'm so sorry. Anthony Nightingale, 44. Mary Rose Nixon, 60. Glenn Roy Paris, 35. Russell James Pollard, 72. Jeanette Kathleen Quinn, 50. Helen Maria Saltzman, 50. Robert Graham Saltzman, 57. Kate Elizabeth Scott, 21. Kevin Vincent Sharp, 68. Raymond John Sharp, 67. Royce William Thompson, 59. And Jason Bernard Winter, 29. I mean, just hearing all those names all together, when you think every single one of those had a family, some of them are from the same family. So it's like the double, triple, quadruple tragedies some of these families have had to go through.
Not just families, but then also like neighbours and friends of theirs. And it's impacted probably thousands of people, you know, not just...
the reach.
Massive. And then it was over such a short period of time.
It's just unbelievable. So the immediate aftermath of Port Arthur was one of overwhelming grief, anger, and disbelief throughout Australia, as you can imagine. Tasmania was a close-knit island state. The fact that it happened there as well, I think, made it even more shocking. It wasn't like inner city. It's, on the island that's quiet, where virtually everyone knew someone affected. Because some of those were locals. Remember the two ladies that worked in the gift shop and stuff? So,
oh gosh, yeah.
So many people knew someone that was there, basically. Memorial services were held everywhere, lots of different places, as the whole nation mourned. The Broad Arrow Cafe, where the slaughter began, was left as a gutted shell. Today, it's still there, but it's a quiet memorial to the victims. Loads of the survivors have obviously been plagued with PTSD. Lynn, the nurse, remember Lynn Beavis, the amazing nurse?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she was the one that had managed to kind of get away. We can't assume she was safe, but she was in relative safety. She went back to the car park and into the cafe to help people with first aid. And no doubt she if not save people, definitely help them with their injuries to stop them suffering more. She says she realized that you can be scared and brave at the same time. I would argue that you're only being brave if you're scared. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not scared, it's not bravery. Just an act. I don't know if I've made sense there, but do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
My friends, when they're struggling, it's always when you feel the weakest that you're actually being the strongest. And it's because you're going through something and you're still pushing on. That's being strong.
You've got something potentially to lose. I agree.
Exactly. So I totally agree that you almost have to be scared or nervous or anxious to be properly brave. So the Grenfells, you remember there was this adorable family, Nanette and Alana and Madeline, who thought that they were getting help.
Awful. No.
Awful. But the car that they'd actually flagged down was the shooter, and he killed them all. And there was a couple called the Grenfells who didn't know them, but they were trying to escape together. They met with Walter Mikach, the husband and father of this family. They said, we cried together. We felt, what could we do? We couldn't do something to save their lives. The guilt just ate at me. That's Pauline Grenfell, who was with them when they died. Walter Mikach lost his entire family in a single instant.
Was he there? Was he there?
No, I don't think. No, I don't think he was there. I think they were having a day out, without him. 9 days after the massacre, he wrote a personal letter, Walter, to the newly elected Prime Minister John Howard. So, newly elected, fairly conservative Prime Minister of Australia, pleading for bold action to prevent any other family from suffering such an immense loss. Walter would later channel his grief into advocacy, becoming a prominent gun reform campaigner and founding the Alana and Madeline Foundation in his daughter's memory to protect children from violence.
So good. So noble.
Right? Some people can, he could quite easily just descend into chaos and go off the rails, having lost his entire family. And he's managed to pull it together and do this amazing, awesome thing. So we have obviously Martin Bryant, the perpetrator, piece of shit, who had been arrested. He set fire to this B&B, ran out on fire, was put out, arrested. The country's anger towards him was intense. So much so that medical staff treating his burns had to be guarded because even they were being threatened by members of the public. Why are you treating him? Blah, blah, blah. Bryant was evaluated by psychiatrists and found to have no insanity defense. Though intellectually impaired, his IQ was recorded around 66, indicating a borderline intellectual disability. He was deemed fit to stand trial. Initially, he pleaded not guilty.
On what grounds? Sorry, on what grounds?
I don't know. I was like, what? When I read that? Forcing survivors and victims' families to potentially endure the anticipation of a trial, a full trial where they have to relive everything. But in November 1996, he changed his plea to guilty on all counts. Yeah, because everyone saw you.
Sorry, what was the time frame? What was the time frame between pleading not guilty and guilty?
Oh, really quickly. I don't exactly know, but we're still within the same year. So it didn't go to trial. He changed it before they went to trial. Martin Bryant was convicted of 35 counts of murder and numerous counts of attempted murder and was sentenced to 35 life terms in prison with no possibility of parole. Basically, he's going to die in prison. I've got a picture of him, but I don't know if I want to share it.
I'm
going to bring it up. Because
I'm curious.
I am going to bring it up because it's not what you would expect to see.
I mean, we're not glorifying him, but I'm just curious what an individual that kills all those people looks like.
I bet you're not imagining this guy.
Do you know what? I was not imagining a guy with long blonde hair, slim, that looks quite young. We all think of different things, don't we, before we see someone. I was thinking he would look... This sounds really awful. I was thinking he would look middle-aged. I knew his age, but I was thinking he would look older than he was. Like, I had an image in my head, and it wasn't that image.
So basically, he looks like almost like a typical 90s Australian surfer dude, right?
Yeah. I think what it shows is that we shouldn't have preconceptions, although we will anyway. Like, our brains, like, we're trained to imagine different things. But I think it just shows you that serial killers, murderers, awful people walk amongst us, and you can't always tell just by looking at someone what they're capable of.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't marry up in my mind. This like surfer dude look is purely just based on the fact that he's got long, kind of blondish hair.
Yeah.
But in my mind, that surfer dude, it's like smoking weed on the beach, not having a whole arsenal of guns and shooting at people. Do you know what I mean? So it just.
And can I just ask, during his trial, did he say why he did it? Or are you getting onto that? Like, did he talk at all?
No. So he, to this day, remains incarcerated. He's never shown any genuine remorse or fully explained his motive. We know about the grudge with the owners of the B&B, but no idea why he decided to just go to this tourist site and just shoot it up.
There's no link. We don't know any link between them. Like his parents, he hasn't mentioned
there's
anything.
no link with the site. It was just like he was on a rampage, or he'd committed these first murders and thought, oh, I want to carry on, you know? One thing that we do know, because obviously a lot of people have tried to explain this because he's not explained it, there's a lot of debate around whether or not he took inspiration is such a shit word to use here, from the Dunblane massacre, because it was 1 month before this. I know that it was difficult. It's a difficult one for us because you were Scottish and from just down the road, and I was living in England at the time, and it just hit the whole country fucking hard. Because this is at a time where we weren't really hearing about mass shootings in the States yet that much. So to have one in the UK was like, what?
It's a massive deal.
Yeah. So, okay. So we had a little conversation about this because there's a movement in Scotland not to mention this guy's name. I'm gonna say it once at the beginning when it comes up, and then I'm not going to mention it again. You said that it's because people remember his names and not the victims' names. I will also be reading the victims' names. Unfortunately, it's another long list. This is a little summary of the Dunblane massacre. This was the 13th of March, 1996. And it was a Dunblane primary school near Stirling in Scotland, where we were just at, and not far from sort of Prestwick area, Glasgow, where you grew up. And this was, like I said, a month before Port Arthur. So this guy, Martin Bryant, the Port Arthur Massacre, he would have heard of it. He would have heard of it, I'm sure. So here he is, the first and only time I'll mention his name. Thomas Hamilton was 43 years old. He entered the school armed with 4 legally owned handguns. And that's the key. He was legally entitled to own these guns, and he had over 700 rounds of ammunition.
Oh.
He shot and killed 16 children, all aged between 5 and 6, as well as their teacher, Gwen Mayer. 15 others were injured. He then turned the gun on himself and died at the scene, which is a chicken shit way out for him. He was a former scout leader. He was known for inappropriate behavior towards boys and had a long record of complaints about his conduct. Again, I want to say this is the 90s, and I hope that we've learned so much since that time, because I hope that that would not happen in this day and age, that you would have
some processes in place with lots of complaints. And I mean, I don't know if a scout leader, I imagine that is a job that you're not paid for. Is it like a voluntary role?
Yeah, I think it's a voluntary.
And even if it's a voluntary role, like regardless, you're with children, you should be DBS checked. You should be, even if that wasn't around then, if there's a list of complaints, come on, guys.
A long record of complaints, a long record is not just 1 or 2 here or there, is it? And I do want to say, when you're working with children, teachers, scout leaders, et cetera, there will be inevitably complaints, because there will be parents that disagree with how you do things with their kids.
Of course, all the time. There will be,
you know.
Parents know best.
Yeah. So you do have to take that into consideration, you know, and what kind of complaints they are. But here we have inappropriate behavior and a long record of complaints. That tells me it's more than a slight disagreement about how to handle a kid falling behind on their homework or whatever.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Okay.
He was also socially isolated and harbored resentments against local authorities and appeared to have like paranoia and so forth. The victims: Victoria Elizabeth Clydesdale, age 5, Emma Elizabeth Crozier, age 5, Melissa Helen Curry, age 5, Charlotte Louise Dunn, age 5, Kevin Allen Hassel, age 5, Ross William Irvin, age 5, David Charles Kerr, age 5, Mari Isabel McBeath, age 5, Gwen Mayer, age 45, that was the teacher, Brett McKinnon, age 6, Abigail Joanne McLennan, age 5, Emily Morton, age 5, Sophie Jane Lockwood North, age 5, John Petrie, age 5, Joanna Caroline Ross, age 5, Hannah Louise Scott, age 5. They would be, what, 34, 35-ish now?
Yeah.
Bless them.
Yeah.
I also want to shout out to Twisted Britain podcast. They are awesome. They were actually students at Dunblane at the time. I don't think they'll ever cover Dunblane on their podcast, but
no, they said they would never cover it.
Yeah, but I can't imagine to even be from Dunblane at this time, but to be a student at the school.
Yeah.
And their podcast is phenomenal. Anyways, they pick some really freaking bizarre cases and they tell them so well, and they film in a pub. They record in a pub.
They're so cool. I love those guys.
Yeah. So do check them out on your downtime from us. So the massacre absolutely horrified the UK and became one of the worst mass shootings in British history. And it led to sweeping changes in gun laws because, again, his guns were legal. The UK government banned almost all private ownership of handguns through the Firearms Amendment Act of 1997. So as a result, you weren't allowed to have handguns anymore.
Can I just ask, what reason did he have them? Like, were you allowed them? Because I remember where I grew up, there was a gun shop and it's no longer there. Like around that time, like maybe because obviously there's a massive loss in income, but were they allowed just to have I mean, there must be some sort of rules for agriculture and stuff, or?
No, I mean, I know you had to register them, you had to, but that's it. So they banned, private ownership of handguns. You know that we are still in the UK entitled to have some guns, but they're not handguns. They're bigger sort of rifles and this, that, and the other for hunting or for agriculture or whatever. A lot harder to commit a mass shooting with these guns because they don't have the amount of rounds in them. You have to reload them.
And they're harder to walk around. Yeah, they're harder to walk around with. You can't just walk in somewhere.
Yeah, you can't conceal them easily.
Yeah.
Exactly. So much more difficult. Unfortunately, still possible, but much more difficult. So there were some interesting links that you could draw between Port Arthur and Dunblane. Like I said, they happened a month apart, but there's no solid evidence that he was inspired by them. It's just interesting that these two happened so close, and politicians in both countries invoked the other tragedy at the same time when pushing for these reforms, right?
Yeah.
There was another mass shooting in the UK. I love that there are not so many, like when I was Googling, there's only a handful. And that's nice because I feel like if we were in the UK, in the US, that there would be a ridiculous amount to pick from, right?
Yeah, I mean, we know people that have taken their kids out of schools in the US and come over to the UK because they cannot imagine sending their kid to school when there's so much.
I can't imagine going there
every day. Can you imagine the protests that have been going on in the UK at the moment? And if some of those people had handguns, it would be insane.
Obviously, different states have different rules about whether you can open carry your guns or whatever, but like, just remember sort of just seeing everyday people with guns. It's weird enough for us in the UK to see police officers with guns, right? Because only the special divisions have that over here. So to see just like every police officer just having a handgun and just loads of other people just walking around with guns is unsettling for us,
I went to Texas for work, and I remember being in the hotel and it said no handguns beyond this point, and it was just like a lounge bar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would you be having a handgun in here anyway that you were allowed?
Do you know when you're like wallet, watch, keys, gun, when you're like leaving the house? It's bizarre. Like when I was at S's Festival 2 years ago, last year, whenever, and I got caught out, like I had to buy a little plastic wash bag and tie one of my waistbands to it as a strap because I couldn't use my handbag to go into the venue because you can only have see-through handbags.
Ah, okay. Is that after the Manchester?
So no, that's after all their shit.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry.
You can't bring in guns basically into these venues. So if you've got a bag past a certain size, it needs to be a see-through bag.
I like that.
I know, but it's bizarre.
Mm.
Anyway, so the Hungerford Massacre is another one of the mass shootings in the UK. It was 1987 in Hungerford, which is in Berkshire in England, so sort of not that far from London. Michael Ryan was 27, again, so young, an unemployed antiques dealer who was described as reclusive and obsessed with firearms and survivalism. But his guns, again, were all legally owned. He had a semi-automatic Type 56 assault rifle, which was a Chinese AK-47 copy. So I don't know what that means, but it does sound fucking intense and like dangerous. And an M1 carbine and 2 handguns, which he legally owned all of those. This is 1987.
Oh, this is before Dunblane.
Before Dunblane.
Okay.
He began in his home in Savernake Forest, I probably said that wrong, where he set fire to his house and car. He killed his own mother, Dorothy, when she encountered him. He moved through Hungerford, which is, by the way, a cute little market town, shooting randomly at people in the streets, in cars, and in their homes. He killed 16 people, including his own mother, and wounded 15 others. The end of the siege occurred when he was held up in a secondary school, John O'Gaunt Secondary School. And after hours of siege and negotiation attempts, he shot himself. So again, another one who escaped justice, I'm going to say it. Again, no clear motive was ever established. Speculation ranged from personal frustrations to mental instability. But there was because he killed himself, they couldn't question him about why he'd done any of this. His victims were Susan Godfrey, 35, Roland Mason, Sheila Mason, Kenneth Clement, Police Constable Roger Brereton, Abdul Rahman Khan, 84. We've only got the age for some of them, I suppose. It's 87, so record keeping, less good. George White, Dorothy Ryan, 61, Francis Butler, 26, Marcus Bernard, 30, Douglas Wainwright, Eric Vardy, Sandra Hill, 22, Victor Gibbs, 66, Myrtle Gibbs, Ian Plale, 34. And again, those are the people that were killed. There were loads more that were shot and survived, and loads more that were injured through the mayhem and chaos of the day. This directly led to the Firearms Amendment Act 1988. So after the Hungerford Massacre, there was an amendment to the Firearms Act, which banned semi-automatic rifles and restricted shotgun capacities. So the bigger guns, semi-automatic rifles, are now banned. The bigger shotguns also limited in terms of their capacity. Then after Dunblane, they banned handguns, so smaller guns, from ownership. So every single time there was one of these big massacres, they did make changes. Now, there were, unfortunately, we still had some mass shootings post Hungerford and Dunblane. There was one in 2010, Derek Bird in Cumbria. This affected a whole bunch of towns because he went on like a proper rampage spree across locations. He went across Whitehaven, Egremont, Gosford, Seascale, and surrounding areas. He was a 52-year-old taxi driver from Rowrah, Cumbria. I know I've said that wrong. He was known locally as quiet and unassuming, but he had personal and financial stresses, which is often what sparks one of these incidents.
Financial, so you go around killing people.
I know. So it was a financial dispute over inheritance and tax issues, and he had conflicts with colleagues, and these were the people that he attacked. The weapons he used were a rifle with a telescopic sight and silencer and a double-barrel shotgun. He started around 10:13 a.m. after an argument with colleagues at the taxi rank because he was a taxi driver. So the first victims were fellow taxi drivers. Some were killed, some were injured. Bird then drove through several towns and villages, randomly shooting people from his car and on foot. The attack lasted over 3 hours, covering more than 45 miles. 12 people were killed, including family members, colleagues, and strangers. David Bird, 52, his twin brother, because they had argued over the inheritance. Kevin Commons, 60, who's the family solicitor, he was shot dead in his home. So again, he was believed to have been targeted because they were having this inheritance dispute. Darren Rewcastle, 43, was a fellow taxi driver. He was shot and killed. And then 11 more were injured.
Wow.
Victims included both, like I said, targeted individuals like his twin brother, the solicitor, et cetera, and others were just random. At 12:30, Bird abandoned his car near Boot in the Lake District, and shortly after that was found dead in the woods after shooting himself with one of the shotguns. Derek Bird's guns were all legal as well, and he held a valid firearm and shotgun certificate issued by Cumbria Police. So they were lawfully owned and registered. He'd been a licensed gun owner for years, mainly for hunting and shooting, shooting sports. After the shootings, the review of the UK license arm raised questions about how someone under personal stress, financial dispute, and with known grievances were still allowed to retain their licenses. The Cumbria shooting highlighted the limits in the UK's already strict gun laws. Firearms were legal if licensed, but the system depended heavily on self-reporting of mental health and personal issues, which Bird had concealed.
How many people, do you have the stats? Do we know how many people actually go, I'm going through a problem at the moment, I've got mental health issues, by the way, I've also got a gun license? I am very skeptical about how many people would actually come forward and say that.
Well, they're supposed to declare them, basically, when they apply for the license. And then I presume they're supposed to, but that's the problem. It's ridiculous. No one's doing that. Do you know what I mean? No one tells their insurance when they have a change of circumstance. No one's reporting to the gun.
I'm sorry. What year was this one, Dee? Sorry, remind me.
This was 2010. So this was after the changes. So now we're looking at whether we can make some changes to, the criteria in terms of getting a license, right? We've restricted the type of guns, but now we've got the issue of like mental health and personal issues.
Yeah. It's almost like self-referral, but it's not self-referral.
It's self-removal. That's the thing.
Yeah, self-removal. And if you've applied for a license,
if you like your guns, you're not going to be like, oh, let me tell you about a thing that might make you take my guns away, are you?
No.
So the victims of this shooting, David Bird, Kevin Commons, Darren Rewcastle, Helen Hughes, Kenneth Fishburne, Isaac Dixon, Jennifer Jackson, James Jackson, Gary Purdom, James Clark, Michael Pike, Jane Robinson. Awful, awful. But it's still maintained that every time we have one of these big incidents here in the UK, it is looked at and changes are made, which is, it's better than nothing being done and it just carrying on, right? Which we know we have in another country.
Can I tell you just a reflection on Dunblane and what happened to me? Because I've just remembered something like really stuck in my mind. So obviously the tragedy happened and it was horrific. And I remember, and I was still at school, and there was a reception at school, and we talked about that, and students were offered like support and stuff. But very, very quickly, the secondary school that I was at and the primary schools around us, I don't know how the funding was secured, if it was local authority, like whatever happened. But if it wasn't there already, they put in restrictive doors. And the secondary school that I was at, like at a certain time, the doors were automatically locked. So I remember going from like a class finishing, and to get out of the main school, like to get out of where we had our art class, you had to push a button inside to get out. You couldn't get back in unless you pressed a buzzer, spoke to someone at reception, gave your name, like come in. And then only at certain times were those doors open. They were open at the end of the day, so everyone could go out. They were open at the beginning of the day up until a certain time. Visitors, like there are all these signs saying visitors report to reception. There was 2 security doors. So all of the stuff around Dunblane, like the security just intensified. And that was secondary school.
I mean, that's all really good. That sounds really good.
But it's like normal now, in my daughter's school, there's like 2-3 doors before she can get through to the classroom. There's like so much stuff, but it's scary to think that might not have existed before Dunblane. I'm sure a lot of schools did have security, but
not really. This was the 90s.
I know, but what happened at Dunblane has heightened it.
I think my school also soon instigated that kind of system where the doors aren't just open for anyone to just walk into a school. I mean, I hate the thought of like how in the States you have like, I mean, if it's necessary, it's necessary, but you know, like metal detectors, but no one else should be allowed to just walk into a school. So, you know what I mean? Having doors and having a system like that seems sensible to me. It's unlikely in the UK that there's going to be another one of these shooting incidents, but it's possible, always possible. But you still shouldn't have like just random strangers be allowed to walk in. So that I think is good, that when these negative things happen, at the very least, you learn from them so it doesn't happen again. That's what you hope and want for, right? And that's like the best way of honoring the victims, I think, is making sure that there are not more.
Exactly. I know.
So going back to Port Arthur, Tasmania, in the days that followed the massacre, there was a huge public outcry in Australia. How could this have happened? How do we make sure it never happens again? But this is where they actually do something about it rather than what happens in the States. Mass shootings were not completely unknown in Australia, but Port Arthur was by far the worst. And the scale of the carnage and the fact that a single gunman was able to inflict so much death so quickly forced a national moment of reckoning. Before the massacre, the new prime minister had taken office, John Howard. So he had only been in office for 6 weeks. Imagine you start a new job and something like this happens 6 weeks in. He was the leader of the center-right Liberal Party. So this is what confused me a little bit, because the Liberal Democrats here, liberal implies liberal, not right. But anyway, so he's not like fascist right, he's center-right, okay? So I'm getting like Tory vibes, right?
Okay, fine, because I would have thought something else until you explained that. Okay.
It's just they have different words that mean totally they have the same words that mean different things over there. He's conservative basically in politics. He was a close ally of the National Rifle Association, friendly US politicians. So he was like, for example, close friends with George Bush. So he was friends with Republicans, is what I'm trying to say, and gun-toting Republicans. But then this happens, the horror of Port Arthur, and he became the driving force for one of the most sweeping gun control efforts ever implemented in a democracy, which led me to think, fuck, does it need to be someone who's more right-wing to implement these changes? Maybe it does. He later recalled thinking to himself in the wake of the massacre, if I don't use the authority of this newly acquired office to do something, then the Australian people are entitled to think, well, this bloke's not up to much. So just made me laugh because I told you there's so many things that are so Aussie about this. This bloke's not up to much is just a funny way for a politician to talk. Anyway, so in a move that would risk alienating some of his own political base, because that's it. If it was a lefty, if it was a Jeremy Corbyn instigating these gun laws, new gun reforms, the left would be on board and the right would be like, oh, we hate him anyways. But this is someone on the right who's doing something that might piss off his own voters. Howard resolved that Australia must drastically tighten its gun laws. He says, the hardest thing to do in politics often involves taking away rights and privileges from your own supporters. So he was fully aware that many rural conservative Australians, normally his supporters, owned firearms. Nevertheless, he pressed on, believing it was necessary to prevent another tragedy. It's important to note that in Australia, firearm legislation is largely under the jurisdiction of the states and territories. Remember, we talked about this. Like in the States, there's state law, and then there is national federal law. So they couldn't, in Australia, just make national changes to the gun laws. They had to get each of the states, and I think we Googled that there were 6 of them.
Yeah, we did. we kind of guessed, and we're like, oh, we got that wrong.
Well, we got it wrong, but not by much. So I was still proud of us.
Like 1 or something.
Basically, they had to get each of the states to agree to make these gun changes, and then they could change it at a national level. So they really needed the cooperation of all of them. And so in an extraordinary show of political will, within just 12 days of the Port Arthur shooting, Howard had brokered an agreement with all state and territory leaders on a set of dramatically stricter gun laws. That's less than 2 weeks.
But do you know what, though, Dee? Strike while the iron's hot, while people's emotions are raw. I know that's probably like, this is where when emotions are raw, it can be turned into something positive.
So the pact was called the National Firearms Agreement, the NFA, and it targeted the kind of weapons and circumstances that allowed Martin Bryant's massacre to occur. So there was a ban on semi-automatic and automatic firearms. The sale and importation and possession of all automatic and semi-automatic rifles and shotguns were outlawed nationwide. So the sale and importation and possession. So that means they all had to hand in those guns. Bryant had used semi-automatic rifles to kill at Port Arthur, and under the new laws, these types of high-powered, rapid-fire guns were prohibited for civilian ownership going forward. Also, tougher licensing and registrations. So gun ownership in Australia, which had varied by state, was brought under a uniform, strict standard. So now all of the states have the same criteria. All firearms owners are required to obtain a license and to register each of their guns and demonstrate a genuine reason for needing each firearm. And self-defense was not accepted as a valid reason, which is interesting, isn't it? Because that means they have to have something else like agricultural or maybe even like sports, like shooting, hunting for fun or whatever. But they can't just be like, oh man, for self-defense, you know? Also, a 28-day waiting period for any gun purchase was instituted so that there were no impulsive buys, and that would allow time to go through background checks.
Yeah, good.
So really good. Buyers also had to pass safety training and could not have certain criminal or mental health histories, among other restrictions. So they really tightened down on that. There was a massive gun buyback program. So perhaps the most dramatic element was the announcement of compulsory gun buyback. Because the new laws banned entire classes of guns, the government aimed to remove those weapons from circulation. So Australians were required to turn in newly banned firearms for destruction in exchange for fair compensation. Using a tax to fund it, the government ultimately collected and destroyed around 650,000 firearms.
What the
650,000, roughly 1/6 of all guns estimated in the country at the time.
Wow.
Other estimates put the number nearer to 700,000 guns confiscated and destroyed, which effectively halved the number of gun-owning households in Australia.
Wow, that's amazing. Well done, that guy.
That is insanity, isn't it? That half of the households now own guns than previous. The United Nations gun registry, the Unified National Gun Registry. So basically there was now a national gun registry. This helped to track all legal guns and their owners across Australia. Also, again, if they move. This was meant to help enforce and prevent state shopping for guns. So previously, someone who was denied a gun license in one state could potentially obtain one in another state. Just bonkers. In the same country, a minority of gun owners were furious. There were protest rallies, and at one gathering, Howard even wore a bulletproof vest under his suit due to threats. But the public sentiment at large strongly backed the changes. As Howard said in a televised interview, this country has decided not to go down the American path. This country has decided to go down another path. So semi-automatic rifles and shotguns virtually disappeared from civilian circulation. The new licensing rules and registrations were implemented, and the culture began to shift. That's the key. The culture, right? Many Australians had grown up with casual gun ownership, especially in rural areas, but they either willingly complied for the greater good or grudgingly accepted the new reality. Remember, we were talking about this last time. How many of your civil liberties or your freedoms or your rights do you feel like you are willing to sacrifice for the greater good? And some people, it's a lot, and other people feel like, nope, there's a certain amount of death and destruction that is acceptable in order for me to keep my guns, basically. People were largely on board, though, which is heartening. Howard's government, it should be noted, was conservative, and many of its supporters were gun owners, yet many of them agreed that Port Arthur marked a turning point. A popular Australian newspaper headline captured the national mood, "Never again," vowing that never again would they allow a massacre like Port Arthur to happen on Australian soil. And the results of the gun reform were closely watched in the years that immediately followed. How effective was this? I already told you about how many less guns there were immediately
I can't believe
after.
650,000 guns were handed in. That is
Half the
insane.
households. It's bonkers.
That's insane.
But how did that translate into actual crime? Because, if these people were just law-abiding gun owners who never did anything wrong, then have we made any kind of difference? So there were sharp declines in gun deaths, unsurprisingly. A comprehensive study by the University of Sydney found that in the first decade after the implementation of all of these, so from 1997 to 2007, firearm homicides in Australia dropped by about, do you want to guess the percent?
80?
Okay, that would be lovely, but 60%.
Well, I mean, that's still massive.
Yeah, 60%. And also, firearm suicides also plummeted.
Ooh.
This is the most relevant, though, to the Port Arthur aftermath. There were no mass shootings, defined as usually between 4 or 5 people being killed in Australia for over 20 years after Port Arthur. So there have been mass shootings, but there wasn't another one for 20 years. In fact, for nearly 26 years, just one mass shooting occurred in Australia following the reforms, compared to the dozens that likely would have occurred.
And the one every day, almost 2 every day in the US.
The US has something like 400 million people. I don't know what the population is of Australia, but I know it's much less. Let me just quickly Google. So Australia is 27 million and the States is 340 million. There's 300 million more people in the States than Australia. So we'll allow for that, but
still an insane number.
Yeah. The only mass shooting incident post-Port Arthur came in 2018, so more than 2 decades later, when a disturbed individual in Western Australia killed his whole family in a murder-suicide. And this was viewed as a tragic outlier in an otherwise dramatically changed landscape.
Yeah, if it's just his family.
Yeah, I mean, that's awful, but it wasn't like he went out into a public space and was able to bang, 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 Australia's swift action after Port Arthur was often cited internationally as a model. Over the years, whenever another country, especially in the United States, endures a mass shooting tragedy, commentators always point to Australia's response. John Howard himself wrote an op-ed in the New York Times in 2013 after the 2012 Sandy Hook school shooting in the US. That was an elementary school, so basically a primary school, urging Americans to consider Australia's example of courageously tightening gun laws. So Sandy Hook, like I said, was an elementary school, 26 to 7-year-olds. So they were 6 to 7-year-olds, 20 of them were murdered and 6 adults. To John Howard and most Australians, Port Arthur has proven that public safety must take precedence over the pleasure or convenience of owning certain firearms. That, again, is the opposite of the Charles Kirk attitude, which is why I wanted to cover this topic now, that a few deaths are worth it for maintaining your Second Amendment right to bear arms. Now, I would argue, and it's not a few deaths in quotation, if it's 2 mass shootings a day in the States, and that's not including the single shootings or those that don't qualify for mass shooting. So why not America, though? This is what I was interested in as well. I won't say it was easy for Australia to change their gun laws, but they definitely did it quickly and with huge positive results that no one can argue with. To put it in perspective, the US has less than 5% of the world's population, but owns about 46% of the world's civilian firearms.
Oof. It's because of their amendment, though, or it's because of their constitution, rather.
Exactly. So mass shootings that are rare in most countries have become a frequent horror in the States. By 2022, the US was seeing at least 1 mass shooting, like we said, 4+ victims per day on average. The one major reason is that the United States has a constitutional right to bear arms embedded in its founding documents. In Australia, no such fundamental right existed. So it's basically one of the ideals that their country is founded on. And that's why it's so difficult, in theory, to change the rules. In the US, any sweeping ban on an entire class of guns would immediately face legal challenges on constitutional grounds. And that's tricky. I don't get it, but I get that it's tricky. So the American legal framework makes it harder to mirror Australia's response, but not impossible. Beyond the legal situation, though, there's also the political reality. The US has a powerful gun rights lobby, most notably the National Rifle Association. So I looked at the NRA, the National Rifle Association, because I had a conversation with someone recently. Hello, Andrew Cunningham, if you're listening. He said that originally the NRA was set up mainly to promote gun safety.
Right, okay.
Which I know they would say they are for now, but they are mainly for gun ownership rather than the safety of its use. And it was because after the Civil War, there was so many guns floating around that no one actually knew how to use properly, that there were lots of like accidents and injuries. So they set up to help with training and lessons.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
And I'm sure they do that to an extent still. But basically, they were concerned about poor marksmanship in the Civil War. So they focused on education, hunting, and recreational shooting. They supported further restrictions, the restrictions on gun ownership after JFK's assassination, and also following the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy. The growing crime rates and urban unrest pushed the NRA members to demand stronger political advocacy. So they started getting more political. 1975-ish, they started opposing any gun control. This is the NRA that we are more familiar with. They became a powerful fundraiser and lobbying force in Parliament, and they adopted a hardline mantra: you don't stop crime by attacking guns, you stop crime by stopping criminals. I agree to an extent. You want to look at the core issues that are making people turn to crime. But in the meantime, should we not give them these weapons of mass destruction? Another one of their messages is also the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. To which I ask, is that part of the registration process? Are you a good guy or a bad guy? Because that's not one of the questions. Yeah, they look at your criminal record, but that doesn't say whether you're a good person or a bad person or whether you're going to commit a crime in the future.
And also, do they ask them are they going through any mental health issues at the moment? Are there any reason why you shouldn't own a gun? Can you let us know if you're not feeling, good in yourself at the moment?
Yeah, just because your record is clean, your mental health record, your criminal record, that does not mean you are not having issues. You're not going to commit crime. You haven't already committed crimes that have gone undetected, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry, no, I do not like this. We are familiar with Charlton Heston and his support of the NRA.
Vaguely. I remember.
So he was a big advocate, and he obviously was like such a famous dude.
Yeah.
One of his phrases was, "From my cold, dead hands." And they have a standard process post mass shooting, their response, right? Initially, they're silent, the NRA. Then they offer condolences. Then they make a plea to avoid politicization. And then they reassert their pro-gun position. Literally, word for word, what happens every single time. So sadly, I don't feel like they're on the right side of things, I don't agree with the fact that it's okay to have some sacrifices of life for this liberty of owning guns.
Yeah. Liberty. I think it'd be interesting to have, you've got people that are born in America, Americans, and this is something they've grown up with, that they've always had, and they believe it's their right. And I think that is a difficult thing to try and change. They've been born that way, they've born believing that, and that is fair enough. I think it would be interesting for people in the States just to come over to the UK and to see the lack of gun crime, to live here for a period of time, and then to reflect and go, actually, what would you prefer? I think it would be so difficult. I think it's an impossible situation.
It's really difficult to change a whole culture. I get that it's in their constitution, they're entitled to have guns, but don't tell me that in your constitutional documents it says you have to have an AK-47, because they didn't exist then. Like, there should be a world where you can restrict the kind of guns that civilians are due to have, even for defense, even for their activity. There's no need for some of the guns that you are just allowed to own, that you can just walk in and be like, hey, I want this.
Are there any restrictions? Just out of interest, I was going to Google it.
Yeah, again, they change state to state, which is part of the problem, but they are mainly based on your criminal record and your mental health issues.
So there are some restrictions, but really not no way enough.
No.
So there is the possibility of having more restrictions.
Yeah, but because of the gun market, the legal gun market being so active and so busy, it means that the secondary market is a lot easier to navigate. So even if you do have anything that means you are not able to buy your gun at Walmart, you could probably find an illegal gun pretty fucking easy.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, Port Arthur, the massacre, stands as a grim chapter in Australia's history, a day of almost unfathomable horror that claimed 35 lives in the span of a few hours. Its impact went beyond the immediate loss and trauma, but it fundamentally reshaped Australia's laws and attitudes towards guns. The country's never again response is often held up around the world as an example of how democracy can come together after tragedy to enact meaningful change. In the nearly 3 decades since, Australia has been mercifully spared of anything close to another Port Arthur, a fact many attribute to the firearm reforms that emerged from the pain of that day. For the survivors and the families of the victims, April 28th will forever be a day of remembrance and sorrow. They carry the memories of loved ones lost, like little Alana and Madeline, cheeky and sweet in their last moments. Each year on that date, the names of the 35 victims are read at the Port Arthur Memorial Garden, ensuring that they are never forgotten. Lynn Beavis, our amazing legend Lynn Beavis, and other survivors often reunite around that time, not only to mourn, but also to support one another, a silver lining of friendship born from tragedy. They share their updates, they celebrate marriages and births, and quietly remember those who are absent. Through these human connections, the nation's ongoing commitment to safety, Australia honors the legacy of Port Arthur's victims. The Australian people and the government refuse to accept mass shootings as the new norm, and they proved that change is possible and that lives can be saved by collective action. So, well done, Australia. We love you for that.
We love you, Australia.
Yeah, so there you go. It's a tough one. I get it that it's in their constitution that they should have guns. And remember when we talked about mass shootings before, Brenda Spencer, about how, some of these places are really fucking rural and there's not a police officer for miles, hundreds of miles. So yes, I get the logic of needing something for self-defense as well. But again, does it need to be a semi-automatic rifle? Does it need to be an AK-47? No.
I was pleasantly surprised to hear that there are restrictions in some states, which goes to show that in the US, at least, there is the possibility of reducing or limiting the type of firearms that civilians have. I think it's going to be an almost impossible situation to ban firearms for, civilian use when it's something that's in a constitution. But I think that if there's already evidence that it can be reduced it can be restricted state by state, then I think that there is some hope. However, if there's on average 1, if not 2 mass shootings daily, and that is not having a massive impact, then
it makes you wonder what has to happen in the States.
Exactly. This is what I'm
saying. For them to be like, should we restrict it even just a little? Do you want to restrict it even a little? Because they've had so many god-awful shootings. And again, we're talking about these mass shootings. We're not even talking about the single shootings or the shootings that don't count in a mass shooting because there's only 3 people that are shot.
I wonder, the gentleman in Australia,
John Howard. Craig David. Do you remember we used to always sing Craig David every time anyone had a first name and a surname that were actually first names? We'd always go Craig David. So John Howard.
He obviously was from that centre right or whatever you said, and he had friends that were gun owners, and I'm sure he was as well, and all that kind of stuff. So maybe it needs a president in America who's pro to a certain extent gun ownership, who is respected, who can make some changes. Who knows? I mean, I honestly don't know. I don't know if a Liberal president would be able to put it through.
Maybe the only way to get them to agree is if it's one of them that makes that change. Look, I'm on your side, guys, but we got to change this because look.
Yeah, we're restricting it, but you guys will still be okay for recreation, or, for hunting, we're still going to allow it. For this, we're still going to allow it. You'll be part of the elite, but let's just stop every other household having it. I mean, I don't know how you would do it, and that sounds really arsey, but I think that there has to be some way of pleasing some people to allow it to go through. And is it the NFA? Is that what it's called? No, not the NFA.
The NRA.
NRA. How much money do they give to the government? Like, how much?
Oh my God, should we Google?
Yeah, so I'm just curious. And what does that entitle them to have?
I wonder if it's even.
Because there's no limit on political support financially in the States, is there?
No, and I think it's also less open.
Like you can, so you can't list all your benefactors.
Oh, well, it looks like in nearly 10 years since Sandy Hook, this is on democrats.org, so let's hope that it's fairly factual, if not bitchy. In nearly 10 years since the Sandy Hook shooting, the NRA has spent more than $100 million to help elect Republicans who support their extreme agenda, including Donald Trump. For instance, in 2020, the NRA alone spent over $12 million campaigning against Biden and another $4.5 million in favor of Donald Trump. They spent $54 million during the 2016 election cycle. Again, that was for Donald Trump, including $30 million to help Donald Trump get elected.
Wow.
Ugh. Donald Trump caved to the NRA in the wake of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and backed off promises to take action because he'd made brief promises of gun control and then just...
Oh, that's interesting that he made initial promises.
Yeah, but he probably said, oh, we'll look at gun reform and that's it. And then
we'll look at the bit of paper that says the words gun reform on it. I've looked at it.
Yeah. Oh, he was talking originally about raising the minimum age for gun purchases from 18 to 21.
Oh my God. Back down. Shut up. 18 is the youngest.
I mean, no, it's actually, again, state to state, it's different.
Because I think of each state, if you could increase the age in which you could own a gun, if you could limit the possession of certain firearms, that would have an immediate impact and still retain the constitutional right to bear arms.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, exactly. You could still own guns, but they're just, I think, why can't you restrict the kind of gun?
Well, exactly.
Federal law prohibits the possession of a handgun or handgun ammunition by any person under the age of 18. Federal law provides no minimum age for the possession of long guns or long gun ammunition, so rifles and whatever. So you can own a gun much younger than 18. I mean,
like if you made it 25, when you're 25, you can own a gun. You can, it's just insane. Absolutely insane.
I know, it's bonkers. And the fact that you can own a gun at 18, but you can't drink until you're 21. We find that insanity because we were drinking much younger. Like, although the drinking age is 18 here, you can drink at 16 in a restaurant with food here.
Can you? I didn't know that.
Yeah. If you're having a meal and you're with someone who's over 18, you can at 16 have like a reasonable amount of alcohol. So you can have a glass of wine or whatever. Whereas also culturally, people have normally tried alcohol with their parents even before then. Exactly. Do you know what I mean? It's Whereas in the States, it's not like that. That's not. But yeah, the fact that you can drive at 17, own a gun at 18, technically younger if it's a long gun, but you can't have alcohol until you're 21. And it makes sense because it's like, well, we've given them guns and cars. Let's not give them alcohol too in the mix. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I probably agree that you shouldn't have all those things all in one go.
Can you imagine if their alcohol laws were reduced? Could you imagine if that was something that Trump came out with? We're going to make it so it's 18 and then like...
Guys, you will have much more fun if you get rid of your guns and lower your drinking age. That's what I think they should do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And on that note, I would like to do an Inquisition because it's a lovely one today.
Please. I think I know which one it is, but I don't know actually if I'm 100% sure.
This is from Vicky. So Vicky, this is my friend Vicky, and this is me at Puckrock Holiday in Slovenia, and we got matching henna tattoos. When I saw that Vicky submitted a tattoo, I was like, but she doesn't have any?
Because I was going to say, I did not know about this tattoo, but okay, it's a henna tattoo. Okay.
This is the tattoo.
Oh, that's cute.
So we went to Punk Rock Holiday with our friend Leslie, who I know I've talked about before. She is in the band Midwich Cuckoos, which if you like heavy music or punky, rock, whatever, Midwich Cuckoos, she's awesome. And we like to show our love for her. So we thought it'd be funny to get a henna tattoo with Leslie. She says, a pretty persuasive person talked me into a tattoo encapsulating our love for Leslie. After a melon ball, it was the best decision we made all weekend. Yeah, because we made a lot of bad decisions that week. Melon balls is the kind of cocktail that we love.
I've never tried a melon ball.
Punk Rock Holiday. I'll make you. It's vodka, Midori, and orange juice.
Oh, God,
and ice cubes.
No, thanks. Keep it. No.
Okay. Well, we then showed Leslie our tattoos, and she thought we were insane. But I think she liked it.
You think she liked it?
Well, look at her face.
Oh, she did like it. She looks happy.
Thanks. I think so. So that is
cute.
Our Inquisition. We got to start thinking about what we're going to do next season, because we should do something else. Should we just get people to submit tattoos that we should get, and every week we get another tattoo?
I like the idea of, like, I know it's a palate cleanser. I think we need to, well, why don't we ask people what the palate cleanser should be? Okay,
guys, we need your help.
Yeah, I loved it when you and Randa, was it when you asked them?
People's Pulse.
What was the People's Pulse again?
When we used to ask them a different question every week. People's Pulse.
Yes, I loved that because you had the little jingle, People's Pulse.
People's Pulse. People's Pulse. People's Pulse.
And it was just you going, People's Pulse. I loved that.
Oh, I got some music in the end. All right, I'll tell you what. Why don't we bring back People's Pulse? And we ask people for their questions.
Yeah, I think that's really good because I like that.
All right, People's Pulse, it's coming back next season. All right, well, I'm going to go.
What are you doing now?
Last time we recorded, I was like, I'm going to go and eat soup with cheese. And I think that's what I'm going to go do now, too. I'm really big into my soups at the moment with cheese.
I'm going to have some soup as well. I'm going to find some. Mm-hmm.
I got diagnosed with like B12 deficiency. Ladies, go get tested for anemia and other stuff. So I'm having to do 6 injections over 2 weeks of B12 and then every 3 months. I know, but the doctor was like, we need to look at your diet because I was like, yes, tell me what food is rich in B12. And he was like, cheese and legumes. I was like, that's literally all I eat. Cheese and beans.
Oh my gosh, really?
So for me, it's not a diet issue. It's an absorption issue. So
right, okay.
Injections.
Oh my God, Dee. And what does a lack of B12 do?
Ugh, shit. So, because we associate B12 with like, I was like the Jerry Halliwell diet where like, you know, she was getting B12 injections. Is it not a fad?
Yes. Yeah.
But if you're deficient in B12, which is easily done apparently, it can make you more prone to anemia, which like I've been anemic most of my life. So that makes sense. It also can affect like your memory loss, and it can lead to things like organ failure if it gets bad enough. So it is important. It's not something that's regularly tested. So if you are feeling like sluggish, this, that, and the other, it's a good idea to request it. So yeah, it's my little public service announcement there. Yeah, so cheese and beans and soup is what I'm going to eat. And you're going to look for soup. And then I'm going to plan my next matchy outfit with you. So
amazing. Let's do that.
Yeah. And we're going this weekend to CrimeCon in Manchester.
In Manchester. I get to see you face to face.
Although this episode comes out after that. So we'll tell you all about it later. All right. Love you. Love our sexy listeners.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you, love you, love you. Bye. Like this episode? Want more? Come visit me, Isla, at Crimley Good Books in the heart of York. We're an independent bookshop dedicated entirely to crime. From cosy mysteries to gritty thrillers, historical whodunits to juicy true crime. We've got signed editions, special gifts and plenty of recommendations for your next obsession. We also host a bunch of awesome author events. Can't make it in person? Visit us online at crimleygoodbooks.co.uk.